Hey guys, what's going on? Lee Sanders here of the RCWR show, covering all things wrestling, entertainment, and beyond since 2011. Coming at you all with some breaking news for this Wednesday, early Wednesday afternoon of April 18th, 2018. It is Wednesday afternoon, April 18th, 2018. It looks like it's legit. I really do not enjoy at all. I have no satisfaction in this. From time to time, I try to do my best to stay on top of certain breaking news pieces. And trust me, I don't like saying this because it stings for me personally. But it looks like WWWF legend and WWE Hall of Famer Bruno Sammartino has passed away at the age of 82. No other information is known right now. What is starting to come out there throughout social media, through credible, reliable sources, as far as members of the news media goes, it appears as though he passed away at his home. And, he's been dealing with some health issues here and there over the past couple of years. I would imagine, since we did our one and only conversation with Bruno, I would imagine maybe shortly afterwards, who knows, that he was starting to have some health problems. But for me, this stings big time. It definitely stings big time. I told you guys when I did the show last night, I am not a fan of April. I just am not. And I went into the reasons why. But for newer listeners that may not be familiar, I basically had said, man, I'm kind of melancholy because I reflect on finding out so late the passing of, someone I considered a friend, my ex-wife. This is the month that she had passed. So I'm going through that motion. Then we find out, like, leading up to doing the show that we put out for this week, Harry Anderson from Night Court, he passed away. We also had the sergeant from Full Metal Jacket, he passed away. You're going, damn, what the hell? And then while we were on the air, like right before we go off the air, literally, we find out that First Lady President President Bush, Barbara Bush, she died. You're going, oh, and now we follow it up with Bruno Sammartino. And on a personal note, at my job, my boss, my owner of the company, she passed away. She died at the age of 86 during the weekend. A lot of people thought she had pneumonia. She thought she had pneumonia, and it turned out she was just having some serious respiratory problems. She really should have been in the hospital, but she passed away. So like I told you guys last night, man, April, just not the month. I just don't like April at all. And it just seems like it continues, at least these past couple of years. Let me tell you something, man. When it comes to Bruno Sammartino, now I did not grow up. Let me first state this up front. I did not grow up during the time in which Bruno Sammartino was at his peak. But let me tell you something, man. In the household that I had grew up in, and the people that had really got me into professional wrestling, it was my dad and it was my uncle Guy. And they really were the ones that got the ball rolling for me. One of my first fondest memories of wrestling definitely came to WrestleMania 3, the Hulkster, Andre the Giant. I mean, I was already watching wrestling just a little bit before that, but that is what set the stone and foundation for me for being a wrestling fan for life, was WrestleMania 3. All right. And it was through my uncle that we'd be able to see and hear about stuff that was going on from, previous years or whatever. And Bruno Sammartino, that was a name that always kept coming up. It was like, yeah, man, as I got a little older, it's like, yeah, man, look up some Bruno Sammartino, man. You love it, man. And I got a little bit older. I would have to say probably like around my teens is when I really was able to start checking out wrestling stuff from yesteryears. I mean, we had a a beautiful thing, pretty much called YouTube and all that, and a bunch of other outlets. That's really when it kind of also had paid to be friends with people in high school that would be also into wrestling. And it's like, oh, you like him? Oh, I actually got a couple of tapes you can check out. That's pretty much how you kind of had did it back then. And I tell you what, the most beautiful blessing that has come as far as this generation goes is the WWE network. And the fact that you can now go on there and you can just type in Bruno Sammartino and for the most part see every single piece of iconic history during his reign there or run in the company. It's great. It's great to relive and everything. But Bruno to me represented a era in professional wrestling that definitely is no more. I mean, take your pick, man. There's so many sections you can look at. You can look at the old territory days. You can look at how everything was just broken up back then before Vincent Kennedy McMahon came in and just basically did the takeover, right? It's like you're either going to be in on this, you're going to join me, or the evolution is just going to pass you by and you're going to be out of business. Come on, you better jump on this. He tried. But when you go back to those old territory days, when you go back to Vince McMahon Sr., and when he was doing the whole Capital Championship Wrestling that would eventually become Worldwide Wrestling Federation, and Bruno Sammartino being one of the focal points of that, the Italian Superman. I mean, here is a man that held on to the WWWF title for, my God, what was it, eight consecutive years? 8 consecutive years, one of the longest reigns, top, just off the break. Still a record that like has not been broken to this very day. It's still extremely high up there. Okay, one of the 5 longest reigns in professional wrestling history. He's got like 4,000 and something days or whatever. I mean, it's just ridiculous. Okay. And then when he went to go get the title one last go round, he held that for like 3 years. Okay. So you're going, oh my God. So I mean, he's got like 2 records right there. Of course, you're also reminded of Pedro Morales and all that as well. Because if my memory serves right, yeah, I'm just freestyling here. I'm not rehearsing. I'm just off memory. If I'm not mistaken, I believe Pedro got the title off of Bruno there. But think about some of the feuds. Definitely Larry Zbyszko. That's the one that jumps out at me the most. Bruno taking in Larry Zbyszko as a young protege, trying to show him the ropes and everything, and, show him how to do it. And then when Larry Zbyszko turned on him, it was like, you just did not see that coming at all. You did not see that coming at all. Let me share with you a personal story. I've never talked about it on air. I've never talked about how sentimental it was to me on so many levels, because I will jump out there and I will say that as far as from the RCWR show family standpoint, I definitely had considered Bruno a friend. I did. And I'll explain to you the reasons why. So we started the show 2011, right? And we were still extremely wet behind the ears. We had a couple of guests. It really wasn't, it was small fry. Any podcaster will tell you when you're starting off your show, you got to work your way. You got to build up the portfolio of guests. You start small and eventually one just strings into another. And eventually, you start getting that recognition. You start reaching a good quality, caliber and talent to come onto your show and everything. So the big break for the show had came in 2013 when we had landed. Actually, no, I want to say, yeah, no, it was actually 2013. It was 2013. We had landed Bruno Sammartino on the show. And this pretty much had came about shortly right after his WWE Hall of Fame induction. It had came about. And I remember I was at work at the time, and I just was like, man, how badass would it be if we were able to get Bruno Sammartino on the show? And I remember Tammy at the time, she said, well, if you really want Bruno on the show, ask. It wouldn't hurt to ask. I said, well, okay. And I remember I believe I sent the email, and his publicist, longtime publicist, right on up to this very day, um, very friendly. It's like, hey, Lee, how you doing? Tell me a little bit about yourself. Tell me a little bit about your show. I told him, it's like, okay, okay. Well, here's what I want to do. I want to get you. I want to get Bruno on three-way. You can talk to Bruno yourself. And if Bruno wants to do it, great. I said, okay. And he's like, yeah, I think Bruno wouldn't have a problem doing it at all. I was like, okay. So spoke with Bruno for like about probably 10 minutes. Dude was just so nice, very friendly, asked me how I was doing. And it was a lot of side chatter that we did before we just talked about the show and everything. And he just came off very warm, very sweet. Um, Seemed like a very stand-up guy, very cool stand-up guy. And Bruno was like, yeah, we'll go ahead, we'll do the show. I was like, okay, awesome. And not one time was there ever a question about money being brought up to do the show. Not one. That's the type of person that Bruno Sammartino was. Now, I don't know how he was with other podcasters. I don't know how he was but there was already a rapport with me and his publicist. We were friendly with one another. And then when I talked with Bruno, I mean, like I said, we spent several minutes just talking before we even got down to the logistics. Bruno came on the show, and I think we talked again like 10 minutes before we did the actual interview. And then we talked like an additional 10 minutes after the show was over. And I tell you, of all the conversations, all the interviews I've done over the years, the Bruno Sammartino one is the one that really stood out to me the most, because I had truly felt as though not only was I talking to somebody that, did so much for the professional wrestling business, not only was this a person who I was a big fan of, but for me, I also have felt like I had made a friend in the process. And I remember during the interview, something had came up, something controversial in WWE, because one of the things that Bruno had talked about was, and you all know, it's well documented, he spent many years like, screw the WWE. He was not feeling what was going on with the Attitude Era. He was not loving it whatsoever. He felt it had become very tasteless. He felt that the product was not what he remembered. It wasn't truly family oriented, family friendly. And he pretty much was like, no, forget this. And then you had the whole steroid scandal that went down. He just was like, no, I'm not feeling what's going on with this company. Screw it. And the fact that you had so many years pass where Vince McMahon and crew, they didn't try to mend fences, and honestly, it wouldn't be until like maybe 2012 when Triple H is starting to come more and more into power that he becomes the Elliot Ness of the Untouchables and says, look, I can get this dude. I can get him. Let me try. You tried it your way. Let me try it my way. And Bruno's whole approach to, Triple H, Paul Levesque's approach to trying to bring Bruno Sammartino back into the fold is, look, I understand all the concerns, trepidations you had about the WWE product over the years, especially the area you're talking about. But the product has changed so much, Bruno. Seriously, just come on your own free time. Look at what we're doing now. Look at this performance center. Look at all of these great things that we're doing now, and see for yourself the product, the company overall. It's changed. We've changed our image. We are actually more family oriented now, and we're going to actually do our best to stay that way. And that's what had made Bruno come back into the good graces of the WWE, right? to eventually, okay, you know what? I will go on ahead and I'll accept this WWE Hall of Fame induction, because they were trying to get him for years. They were trying to get him for years, but he just kept rejecting it because he didn't like what was going on with the product. And he also didn't like the fact that it seemed as though WWE just kind of, well, screw you, whatever, right? So I remember all of that. I remember there was one point where I asked him something that had happened on WWE programming that week. I asked him if he had approved of it, and he told me straight up, he said, Lee, no, I wasn't even aware of that. And I say, yeah, I can definitely show you a link and you can check it out yourself. It might not be that much of a big deal to you, but, and because he was honest, he said, I really don't watch the product like that, but yeah, I would like to check out this segment that you are talking about. I'd love to see it, show it to me. And, it was interesting too, because I remember I had befriended an editor, and it was a guy that was working on my website in the early days. And I remember before I went out of my way to try to figure out how to interact with Bruno and try to get Bruno on the show, I remember this guy, and it just really seemed like he was stringing me along. When I look back on it in hindsight, he really wasn't serious about trying to connect me with Bruno. But I remember there was an event where ROH was recognizing Bruno's career, if I'm not mistaken, out in Pittsburgh. And I was like, oh my God, hey, that's pretty cool. I was like, yeah, man. It's like, if you could maybe talk to Bruno, and dude just showed me some picture of this plaque that Bruno was given, and that pretty much was it. And he's like, oh, I forgot. I'm like, man, whatever, dude, like whatever. And it's fun memories that I remember. But for me, Bruno was definitely a friend of the RCWR show. So much so that off and on, I did check up on Bruno over the years. I would email the publicist and I'd be like, hey, it's Lee. I was just wondering how, Bruno was doing. Is Bruno doing okay? And, he'd be like, oh, yeah, Lee, hey, how you been? Yeah, Bruno's doing pretty good. Why don't you call him? Why don't you call him? Each time I would try to check in with Bruno. See, I'm old school. I'm just respectful like that. If I have somebody's number, and I still have to this very day, I have Bruno Sammartino's home phone number. Very rare where you hear me come on the show and be like, but this is just how cool me, Bruno, and Bruno's publicist was. It was like off and on over the years when I did check in with the publicist to ask how Bruno was. He's like, oh, hey, Lee, how you been? He's like, yeah, Bruno's actually okay. Why don't you call him? I'm sure he'd love to hear from you. And I remember, finally, after a couple of times, I was like, okay, I'll do it. So I remember I called Bruno. I got his voicemail or answering machine. It was old school. Bruno was rolling old school like that answering machine. I mean, vintage answering machine. You know how it is sometimes. If you have to call certain people, like if you work white collar and you got to call individuals, the difference between, okay, cell phone, and then, oh my God, that sounds like a vintage answering machine I'm listening to right now. Hear the voice and all that in the background. So I remember I left a voicemail on Bruno's answering machine. I say, hey, Mr. Bruno. And I always called him Mr. Bruno. Always. I say, hey, Mr. Bruno, it's Lee from the RCWR show. Hey, I'm just checking in with you. I'm just hoping that everything's okay. Hope you're doing all right. That's it. It wasn't about trying to get him on the show or anything like that. I legitimately wanted to know how he was doing. And over the years, it was always a situation where, I'm sorry. It was always a situation where I said, I like to get Bruno, pick his brain and talk wrestling with him. And, not so much about what's going on with today's WWE product, but it was just one of those cases where I'm like, yeah, man, I'd really love to talk to Bruno and just go back in the time machine and talk about some of the cool stuff that was happening with him and wrestling and just all that, just conversation, man, just talking, just shooting the shit. And I just kept putting it off. I 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 kept putting it off. And here we are now. This one stings for me. It really does. It really does sting from me. Um, we lost a piece of iconic history. We lost a piece uh, of a relic. That connection to how wrestling was way back when, and the different feuds, the atmosphere. I mean, here is a guy that sold out Madison Square Garden every single time he stepped foot in that place. Every single, can you imagine that? Can you imagine that? I mean, that's almost like equivalent to the Rolling Stones. That's almost equivalent to freaking the Beatles, right? But I mean, to be able to come there consecutive times, that's just phenomenal. I would like to believe that in the Hulkster, and just as far as from a professional wrestling entertainment standpoint, I would like to believe that they are like in the top on that top 10 list for like all-time sellouts at MSG. Man, that's how impactful. Bruno was one of those cats, big, at his peak, big, strong, muscular, beefy looking dude, great look, didn't come off snobbish or anything like that. I mean, you had black people rooting for him. You had the Chinese, you had Hispanics, you had the whites. Everybody came together for Bruno Sammartino. The way he was coming up when his career pretty much had began and pretty much kicked off in like the 50s or whatever. Like, yeah, you think about the segregation at its peak, all that shit that was going down back then. But none of that mattered. Oh, Bruno's in town? Man, all the races came together. If differences could be put aside, sex, race, creed, religion, if stuff could be put to the side for just one night, it definitely came about when Bruno Sammartino was in town. Um, it was a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing. And I would strongly encourage you guys that are younger listeners, you don't know anything about Bruno Sammartino, I would highly encourage you all to go hop on the WWE network, check it out. I know over the years, something else that I had kind of put off over the years, there was some stuff that Bruno Sammartino had did for Sean Oliver and his kayfabe commentaries production. I'm not getting any endorsement deal by plug-in. I'm going to be literally doing like you guys. That was always for me on the back burner, checking out some of the stuff that he did for kayfabe. I'm gonna check that out. Also, there was supposed to be a WWE Bruno Sammartino documentary. I don't know how far along WWE had came along with that. I don't know if that's a situation where they went on ahead and put that on the back burner because they felt as though it wasn't going to bring in enough sales. Because you all know nowadays, the way WWE is looking at the DVDs, they've drastically cut it. I mean, as far as this year alone, there's really not going to be that many DVDs that's going to be coming out. They're now starting to see that DVD sales aren't banging like it used to be. So I'm not really sure if at this point, one, how much footage. I know they were recording some stuff about Bruno. I'm not sure how much they've got on the shelf, on the back burner, that they're going to go on ahead and compile a DVD together or what. But there was a documentary that Bruno had did. It was independent outside of the WWE. Y'all may want to go on ahead, check that out. And I definitely want to extend my heartfelt condolences, wishes, prayers to the family, friends, colleagues of Mr. Bruno Sammartino, again, who shockingly passed away at the age of 82. Passed away at his home in Pittsburgh. Of course, any more information that comes in, I mean, at this point, I'll share it with you guys on next week's RCWR show. But once again, WWWF legend, WWE Hall of Famer Bruno Sammartino worked with the likes of Freddie Blassie, Buddy Rogers, George the Animal Steel, Dick Lane, was doing color commentating for a good amount of years there, had accompanied his son, David Sammartino, to the first WrestleMania, Madison Square Garden in MSG. Yeah, passed away. Very unfortunate. I definitely would love to get you guys' thoughts on the passing of Bruno Sammartino. So do sound off, post your comments down below. And I unless something weird goes down, and I like what was said in the chat here. Yeah, I mean, if you're just kind of doing a recap, Johnny Valiant, yeah, Johnny Valiant passed away. Also, yeah, Larry Zabisco's Hall of yeah, exactly, exactly. April has been a weird month, hasn't it? As far as all the people that's been, it's weird. I don't like what's happening. I told you guys, I don't like April. I just do not like the month of April for so many reasons. But hopefully things kind of pick up for us. But this is definitely if you're a pro wrestling fan, a true pro wrestling fan, you're a fan of pro wrestling history. This definitely is a thing. But you kind of take comfort knowing that hey, he went out peacefully at home 9 times out of 10. It wasn't a case where he passed away by himself. He leaves behind his wife Carol. Definitely my thoughts go out to her. They've been married for 60 years. And, sadly, and this is always the case, when you have a couple that have been together for that significant period of time, usually, I'm not jinxing it. History has just shown it's just a matter of months, a year, maybe even 2 years. Like with the founder of my at my job, the founder of the company, the owner of the company, when she passed over the weekend, she passed literally the year to the date that her husband died. So it's like the 1 year anniversary. It's like, whoa. So, but he leaves behind his wife Carol of 60 years and 3 kids. So once again, rest in peace, Mr. Bruno Sammartino. You will definitely be missed. So feel free to share your thoughts, your memories on Bruno Sammartino, maybe some of your favorite Bruno Sammartino matches, and we'll follow up with you guys on next week's RCWR show for Tuesday night feedback. Please make sure you like this and share it with other people as this news is just slowly starting to come in on Mr. Sammartino's passing. Okay, guys? I'm wishing all y'all to be safe. Most importantly, be kind to one another. I will see you next go round. Everybody do take care.